So it should be recording now. It still says, yeah, well, that's the thing I hate about me. It still says it's waiting, but we are dipping. So, okay, let's just pretend it's recording and let's see if it's actually recording.
It says recording in the top left for me, so
Okay.
I think we're good.
Now it says it's a second time. Okay. Okay. Anyway, it is recording now, also according to my own thing. So first, I think we have Ben with TOC updates.
Sure. So I had a call with the CNCF TOC on doing the due diligence. They just asked a bunch of questions about mostly around who's using it, why, what's it about, and the two funny takeaways that I got were I was saying that we started OpenMetrics because vendors like Cisco look at Prometheus as being proprietary, and the TOC was like, but Prometheus isn't proprietary, it's open source. And I said, yes, but that's not how vendors think. And so we have to do this standards body stuff. And I kind of compared it to like IPFix, which is proprietary Cisco, or NetFlow was proprietary Cisco, and IPFix is the rename of NetFlow. I thought that was a reasonable analogy if people know what either of those two things are. And then the second one that I wanted to get some help with, which is links to contacts to talk to people who are OpenMetrics implementers that are not part of Prometheus. And so I figure Rob's a good one for that. I don't know who else. If I can get some offline contact information for implementers and or users.
Users, probably most people. I also had a call with TOC, and that's the point which I made, that most anyone using a variety of what we have in our ecosystem will already be an adopter. Datadog, Brian, I think you can talk on Datadog.
Yeah, Datadog, because they've contributed to Client Python.
Okay, so maybe we should just forward this information then.
Yeah, and I guess OpenTelemetry are doing some as well.
Yes.
Yeah, how are they consuming and integrating right now? They're re-implementing the spec themselves, right?
Yes, with the focus on. So currently, the main focus is within the collector, where you have a lot of focus also on remote write.
Yeah.
But obviously,
I was just trying to work out whether they were like how they were doing the scrape code. Were they writing the scrape code themselves?
Yeah.
Are they okay?
Yes.
All right. Sounds good.
Yeah.
So they're implementing the scrape code as per OpenMetrics spec, essentially.
Yeah, there it becomes a little bit complicated. Of course, they have different parts in their pipeline. You can consider it once as currently the main focus is on the collector, and there the main focus is on remote write. So actually, this doesn't actually go through OpenMetrics at all. Of course, this is already in a val-alike format. But obviously, to have full integration with the complete ecosystem, they also need to be able to expose metrics in OpenMetrics compatible format, which is currently not the focus area of the compatibility work of Prometheus WG, but that is one of the things which need to be ticked to be actually able to have a Prometheus or compatible scrape metrics endpoint, which has been instrumented through OpenTelemetry.
And I just sent you privately there the contacted the person at Datadog who was involved with that.
Perfect. Okay, test suite.
Yes.
So for anyone who let me do so on Monday we as Prometheus team and CNCF announced the Prometheus Conformance Program, which is structured into component compliance And when you are compliant with whatever sections or whatever components are applicable to you, then you are Prometheus compatible. So the Prometheus agent, which will relatively soon be a thing, obviously doesn't have a PromQL component. So as of right now, it only has a remote write and OpenMetrics to be compliant to be considered Prometheus compatible. Of course, there is no PromQL in the agent. Maybe there will be at some point for certain use cases, but as of right now, there isn't. So it's not a required checkmark for compatibility. From the perspective of that compliance suite, which you can find at Prometheus/compliance on GitHub, I can also link it in the mini notes. We simply bless the OpenMetrics test suite as part of the Prometheus compliance test suite. So it simply refers to no, it's in the doc. So it simply refers to the OpenMetrics specification and test suite as the canonical thing to be compliant to have the compliance on Prometheus side. There are several angles how we can reuse the OpenMetrics thing within the Prometheus compliance. In particular, we have the remote write compliance, which in theory could simply take all the OpenMetrics output and check that everything which is valid or invalid on OpenMetrics side makes it to the other side as correct data or not. Which also allows obviously to test all the pipelines and such. The other is more automation around test data which is emitted from exporters and integrations, but that will still not ever be fully automatable, I think.
Yeah, I think we can get a lot. And one thing to keep in mind, though, is that Prometheus it can parse correct OpenMetrics, but it'll also accept certain incorrect inputs. So Prometheus parsing things is necessary but not sufficient to determine compliance. And on top of that, even with the automated tests, and as much as we can automate, there's still a few things that require a human to look at them. Just because there will be exceptions sometimes, like maybe you really do have one label that applies across an entire target. Like that is theoretically possible that it might come up extremely rarely.
I suspect that's similar to PromQL, where it's also unlikely that there ever will be a fully automated test, but it is what it is.
Yeah, but the way I see things is we're kind of just testing exporters and applications to say, is this output good or not? And for parsers, it's like, right, here's all your data. Are you rejecting the things you should be rejecting? And there are things there that Prometheus won't reject because it's only looking at things line by line, and that's okay per the spec. And we might just separate those out a bit, but there's other things it should be catching and so on. So there's wiggle room for the sake of making it easy to implement, because we don't want everyone to have to do a full state machine parser to figure out all the metric families and so on, because we want it to be easy to integrate with. But if we're going for if someone's claiming full complete compliance, there's extra things they should be looking for.
So Gibbs, as far as I understand, you want to do work on the test suite, correct?
Yeah, Gibbs will help drive it internally. Gibbs, yeah, we've taken on we've taken the first pass on some of the OpenMetrics tests, and then we have some engineering bandwidth to also take on more. And then if you're up for it, Gibbs, it, and I think we had a brief discussion about this. It'd be good for us to help shepherd that internally.
Yeah, definitely. And I was just curious, I don't know if there's. I was just looking through. I wasn't clear on how, and this is probably still TBD, since things are still in draft mode. But how do we go about reviewing test results and giving out the certifications, and what is that process of submitting test results? How is that going to work for people? And are we the ones reviewing?
Yes. So there's a question of whether we're looking at a parser or an exposer. So for a parser, we basically take all the test cases, chuck them at it, see what fails, and then analyze it. like there are a few extra tests we should probably be adding in there, because like these tests are designed to test the Python client. Like they're reasonably exhaustive, but they don't test things that don't need to be tested in the Python client because I know I've done the right thing.
Mm-hmm.
But for example, we should probably add a test of something that has 100 labels, just to kind of set a line in the sand of, no, really, you should accept at least this many. How many more than that is debatable, but at least setting an example of, by the way, this is a reasonable number. If we're talking an exposer, so an exporter, basically you chuck the Python client at it and see if it produces valid output. But there's probably some also best practicey stuff we could add code to detect, and this would be OpenMetrics specific because the parser doesn't need to know about this. Like detecting, for example, like we do a scrape once a minute for 5 minutes or something, and look for weird stuff across scrapes, like series appearing and disappearing, or we notice that, hey, this label is across everything, or we notice, hey, these counters are going backwards, or these counters are resetting, or just looking for weird stuff like that to aid a human in reviewing things.
So that's more like a compliance test, Brian, rather than integration test, right?
Yeah, it's more like, hey, are you following the spirit as well as the letter, sort of thing.
Right.
Some of that's also the letter, but
Yeah, but that just to get on the same page. So that would be a tool, not like a test suite. Does that make? Yeah. Okay, that makes sense.
You still need to run this as part of compliance, but
right.
It's not a hard pass fail, but it's certainly suggestive.
Yep.
And then to answer the other part of Gibbs' question, the actual stamp is something which is a little bit TBD still, because that's still how basically CNCF needs to figure out some paperwork and such, and Prometheus team along with CNCF. But I mean, on a high level, when OpenMetrics is happy, Prometheus is happy, and then this will be part of the stamp. But how this works exactly is a little bit TBD indeed. The more automation we can offer, the easier it becomes for everyone to stay up to date.
Yeah, especially if we are requiring this every 12 weeks or months. Was it?
The current thinking is every 12 weeks, which will hopefully lead to not everything being done all at once. If we find that this is too short term or something, or that things are not moving so quickly that they need regular updates, we can always extend those periods. The thinking is just to be more careful and extend. Of course, you cannot ever take anything away when it's marketing relevant or certification wise. It's a lot easier to just extend once we have some sort of understanding what that actually means day to day.
Okay, no, that's good to know. And then I'm assuming like once details get flushed out more, like the readmes and whatnot will get more beefed up with like the details. Because I was just reading through, it was still a little bit unclear of how the whole process would work when going about these tests as like an end user of everything. So,
I mean, on the positive side, that means anyone who drives the work gets to decide. So if you want to drive this, you get to define it. That's
a good offer. Yeah. No. I mean, yeah. No. I think. I mean, I can definitely help like add some of my initial thoughts to like the readmes and whatnot. Just things that I think I would find helpful myself, and I'm sure others would as well, in terms of details or just knowing when to expect things timing wise as well would be helpful, I think, for people.
Agreed.
Yeah, but like in development terms, being able to have some of the compliance tests developed will be useful. Like the one that takes a few scrapes over time and checks weird stuff isn't happening.
Yep. Yeah. We'll. I think we can take that on. I'll have to get back to you with like timelines, but yep. And like anything else on the development side, I mean, we can just start with that for the time being. But yeah, I guess like the rest of the compliance stuff, like, I mean, remote write and prompt QL are already fairly sophisticated. So, but so actually, I mean, I guess, yeah, Brian, you mentioned a few test cases as well on the existing parser side, such as 100 labels and other things would be good. Is that right?
Yeah, that's one, just because I don't need to test it to the Python client because it has no limit.
Yeah.
But I think we should set at least an implicit expectation, because the docs, like I say, the spec says, you can have limits, but keep in mind real use cases. And I think if we choose 100 labels, that just satisfy all reasonable use cases that currently exist. Because I think, for example, and I'll be on an info metric most likely, because otherwise it's showing you 2 or 3 generally.
Yeah.
Like there's some Amazon feature that lets you have 60 labels, 60 tags on something. So chucking all of those into an info metric seems like a reasonable use case for me. So if we just pick 100 out of the air, that's enough to cover an info metric of that size.
Mm-hmm.
The largest we've seen, I think, was 40 to 50. I mean, numbers can always be hammered out at some point. I think the largest we saw in the field with CNCF was 50, all things considered, going through the full pipeline. But rough, that order of magnitude-ish probably makes sense.
I think that as a baseline, it's fine. 1,000 might be going a bit far, but I think 100 is pretty reasonable. 10 will be too small.
Yeah, I think 10 is too small, agreed. I think looking at what is in CNCF, but that also seems to be like a detail. For actual work, I think just creating 1, 2, 3 issues and hashing out the actual work packages from there is probably the most prudent way.
Yeah, I put some of the stuff in the other doc.
Oh, which doc?
The previous one that Richie created.
The test doc. We can link this from the thing from the meeting notes.
Yeah, that'd be helpful. With the tool that checks an exporter, are we will we get enough data? Like, are we concerned that like an exporter, I know we run it and like it's such a basic set of data it's exporting that we don't check some of its other behaviors?
I think that actually it's the other one is how long it takes. But I think the main thing is basically run realistic road through it for n minutes and then see what it is. Because obviously if someone just turns an exporter up pointing at MySQL that's doing nothing, for example, it's not going to spot issues. But if realistic road, and that's about as hard we can specify it, is going through it, and
Okay. So I mean, like it might even that makes sense. It might even be worth at least like saying, I mean, we could say up front, like we expect whatever test we run here for all metric types to be exported at least, or like maybe there's some prerequisites we could have on that. I could see it being hard though, because like you can imagine it. Yeah, maybe a MySQL exporter doesn't have a info metric or something like that.
Yeah, well, no, that's fine. We don't require exporters to have info metrics at all.
Yeah.
Like what we're checking, A, the output is valid, and B, over time, it doesn't do weird stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
So really it's like run your regression tests against it, grab a scrape, run your regression tests again, grab a scrape, send both of those to us, and we see if anything odd has happened between those two.
Yep. Yeah, that all sounds good. I'm the only
you could just use a Prometheus server. Basically point a Prometheus server at a target, let it run for some amount of time, and then use the Prometheus server's meta metrics and then pull all the metrics for that target and do some analysis on it. I'm
not sure Prometheus is actually gathering enough data for that. I think we pretty much want the Python client here, because we want to actually put out the metric families, and like it's not much processing anyway. I think it is only those 5 or 6 we need to do.
Yeah, I would also tend to agree that this probably makes sense, but also, I mean, part of this is just writing down what we expect to happen, and if we automate running 3 different things against an exporter, that also is totally fine. So yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted. I was wondering about the use case of like, I don't know, someone is implementing OpenMetrics and they they run it against the tool, and they only export like a few metrics, and they actually have a whole bunch of bad behaviors, but it doesn't expose that behavior because they put such a naive workload through it. But I mean, I guess, to Brian and Ben's point, we can just kind of like say that it should be load that's representative of the tool. Like the onus is on them if they haven't tested more of it.
Yeah, that every metric is actuated or whatever, or like there might be some metric that pretty much is never meant to be done, but yeah, you basically just put in text. They're saying, hey, please actually use all your metrics. Yeah. And to be honest, the sort of problems I expect to see would probably be on ones that would be on their typical load anyway, rather than getting out into the weeds.
Yep. Cool.
And like if we're giving certifications for 12 weeks, if something does arise, it can be dealt with in 12 weeks.
Cool. Awesome. Thanks for, sorry, I just wanted to clarify all that stuff. Great.
Yeah. I guess probably be linting stuff as well, like, hey, what are your units like and so on.
Yeah. This would also make sense to just retest. Then once we are at that level, it also makes sense to automate, for example, around the exporters, or try and automate around the exporters and such, which we list on the website and everything. The last thing on the agenda is a little bit of a non-update, IETF. A lot of IETF members promised to write feedback, and there hasn't been a lot of that. So I started poking people to please send what they promised. Yeah. Once KubeCon is over, I'll do the few minor things which they have asked. I think we can remove the auto builder thing from GitHub again, because it's kind of broken all the time anyway, and I can just run the ID building thing locally from the Markdown. Yeah, but that's basically the IETF update.
Cool.
I think that's more or less it already.
Yeah, the testing thing as well, it might be worthwhile just someone with fresh eyes, like you'd say, just go through the doc and see if there's anything else that isn't covered by the tests.
Yep.
As I said, like the tests are designed to test the Python client implementation, so there's probably tons of stuff I've missed just because I know internally it's not a problem.
Yeah, Gibbs, we can go through like a, look at all the tests, go like read the spec again, just scrolling through it and just making sure that there's like major things that aren't like are missing, that are missing tests.
Yeah, that, and just like more explanation on how to go about the process to like do the tests is more what I was getting at. That's a little bit still fuzzy for me at least when I was looking. So we can definitely we can do that while we kind of run these internally. It could be like a good way to kind of get some feedback out of that.
Yep.
Sounds good.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, and this fresh eye thing is absolutely correct. So I think you'll be best posed to find stuff we missed.
Is OpenMetrics, is there like a committee that works on the whole conformance program, or is it, or are people, that's you, okay.
The people in this call, I guess, is the current absolute extent of it. So welcome to the club.
I didn't know if there was like separate people working on the other compliance tests, or if it's just like kind of.
Yeah. Julius donated the remote write stuff, right?
No, Tom did the remote write and Julius did the PromQL, but that is then with the Prometheus. That's the Prometheus compliance.
Yeah.
Or OpenMetrics compliance. Neither of them work on this. But again, also for the remote write, it might make sense to just pull in all the tests of OpenMetrics and see what comes out on the other side. That might actually also be an interesting thing to just.
How would that would mean that an implementer must accept remote write though? which I don't think is going to be the case.
No. Look at how the you can do this with Prometheus or the Grafana agent, or soon the Prometheus agent, where you just expose everything as a static website or web page, and then you just ingest this and see what is emitted as remote right on the other side. If you look at the test suite, it's relatively easy to add new things.
Yeah. I think we briefly talked about this though. Like, I mean, Ben was saying you could just put it into Prometheus, and to Brian's point, like, it might just be easier to just be very specific, do very specific nuanced tests in like some Python code rather than like do some, mechanical stuff like we're talking about. I guess like that's one interesting thing, but it seems like we can get more specific on what we test if we actually have a thing talking directly to the exposer.
Yeah. Like at the end of the day, what we need to test it is 2 scrapes. A few more doesn't hurt. Because like the sort of thing you're testing when you're involving your Prometheus is that you're testing your Prometheus equivalent. You're not testing the exposer.
Also, I could see that like folks would appreciate it being a very small scoped test, if that makes sense. Like, yeah. If you're writing an embedded OpenMetrics exposer, it'd probably be nice that you can just run like a very small thing rather than have to set up things that call other things over the network.
Actually, just looking at the remote write tests and wondering how it's testing for staleness.
It's not done yet. I think staleness is not yet being tested.
By the way, I noticed in the OpenMetrics spec, and I'm definitely quite late for the next meeting now, but I noticed in the OpenMetrics spec, there's nothing about staleness, right?
That's correct. Well, no, there is. There's enough about staleness, because staleness, remember, is Prometheus internal implementation detail.
Yeah.
OpenMetrics spec says is if something no longer exists, no longer expose it.
Yep.
This touches on part of what for the Prometheus compliance, we might end up with certain tests which are then just somewhat holistic end-to-end, hand-wavy definition, which is why only the combination of all relevant components in the end will then be considered Prometheus compatible.
Yeah, and this is also one of the reasons why a human can be in the loop, because generally a time series disappearing from an exposer is not what you want to do. If it's like a counter, that's direct instrumentation. But if you're looking at something like a file system is unmounted, it's the right thing to do. So a human needs to look at that and say, actually, no, that makes total sense. Or actually, no, please don't do
that. Same as Rob, I'm also pretty much at time. I can drop and leave this running. I don't know if the recording will still run, but I would need to drop.
I think we're kind of done.
Okay, also fine.
Yep.
Okay, cool. Then thank you very much and see you soon.
Yep.
Okay.